Hello, hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Baki Talki, the final season. It's father and son dining. So, of course, joining me is my dad.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. And isn't it ironic that you and I are actually going out for dinner on Monday?
Oh,
And
I
here
was
we are discussing Baki and Yushiro having a couple of meals themselves.
I was thinking about that the entire time. The meals they get up to, it's this is one of my favorite episodes of the season. Just because it's so odd. You don't usually get this type of character based stuff in Baki. But anyway, before we dive into that, I have a fun question I've been asking everybody for the final season. So after this episode, I believe there's 6 episodes left for Baki Hanma. What do you want to see before the show ends?
Oh, well, I want to see the biggest battle of all time in the history of all civilizations' battles.
Well, it's not a battle; it's a father-son
And
fight, of course.
well, yes, that is a line from the episode, but yeah, that's it. Baki. I've only watched a handful of episodes, and I've listened to a number of people talk about other episodes, but it does seem to be about battles, either seeking out a way to lose in a battle or to find a way to beat your father, which is, a very difficult task
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
in a battle. But we didn't get much of a battle without trying to give away the plot here in this episode. So I want to see this battle that is being alluded to.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. It's they really do commit to this, and like literally, I think every other episode for the rest of the season is going to be focused on this fight. But this is just the prelude, the build up to the greatest father son fight. I did want to touch on that term. I feel like there is a Japanese word for father son fight that rolls off the tongue a lot more because the amount of times they drop it, like this such a specific phrasing that means nothing. It's got to be a translation thing.
Like Farfanugan, those German words that have very long words that have a specific, very, very specific meaning. So it doesn't, in English, it sounds pretty lame, but there's a Japanese word that everybody would know what it means. That sounds much more impressive. Is that what you mean?
That's my theory. It's just that, like, like when they describe it as a father son fight, like obviously, that's accurate. But it's like if I had a ham sandwich and I called it like my double white bread lunch meal, and I called it that 15 times. Like it's an odd phrasing that's
Right, right.
continuously repeated. Um, I don't know. I've noticed that with a few shows that they'll just have a term that just keeps coming up, and I'm like, what's going on here? But I love it. It and
I can see that.
yeah, I'm getting the sense. I'm interested in what your opinion of this episode was, but we'll get to that at the end. So this episode basically has 3 chunks, and I would say we have some build up where Baki and Yujiro talk to some randos. Then they go to dinner, and then they go to dinner again. And although I enjoy the latter 2/3 of the episodes a lot more, let's jump through the first part. Actually, before I jump in, because I know you're a very musical guy, what did you think of the new theme song?
I thought you might ask because I hated
Mm-hmm.
the other time that was new. This one I didn't mind. I liked the tempo. I thought that okay, that was okay.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it's fun, and it does a good job of telling a very simple story. It's like this guy's gonna fight this guy, and then that's what happens.
It made the lettering and the words were all in Japanese in whatever episode link I clicked on. So I'll take your word for it that it told a good story.
Well, the lettering's just graffiti, but I feel like it's just there for set design purposes. All right. So we have 4 conversations, and we can just jump through these quickly. The first up is Gary Stridham talking to Yujiro. He and Stridham is saying like, "Oh, as I was surprised you're gonna go get dinner with your son."
Seriously? Your battle with Baki is happening soon?
It's not a battle, it's a father son fight.
What did you think of these two guys?
Well, the one guy, he looked like GI Joe
Mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm.
me, and they're just chomping cigars, and then he's sort of just about to say you're going soft, but he quite quickly stops himself when he sees Yushiro's reaction to that.
I have to ask, Yujiro. Could it be
But it was, other than that, it was a pretty pedestrian conversation.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good way to make sure other people know you're not soft. Like if you can literally just almost kick them in the face before they can say it. But
That's
yeah,
usually how I go. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, there's a reason he looks like G.I. Joe. From my understanding, this guy is like a liaison for the U.S. military who's just sort of there to keep an eye on Yujiro. It's fun. A few episodes ago, Yujiro and the United States signed a non-aggression treaty with each other. So um, there's some diplomatic tension between the two. All right.
It's pretty impressive when you're signing non-aggression treaties with individuals as opposed to countries. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, you would have loved this scene. Barack Ozma, which is their copyright-free version of Barack Obama. Literally had to like he put like his hand on his chest and made like a pledge of friendship to Yujiro. And they imply that every president's been doing that since Reagan. It's honestly they spend so little time on what is such an incredibly interesting idea. Anyway,
Right.
the next scene we get Baki talking with their good pal Tokugawa.
It's just a father-son fight, but it will cause a lot of trouble. No way to avoid that.
What a bold thing to say.
And basically, the topic of discussion here, there's two takeaways that I liked from this. But the first is that Tokugawa and Baki agreed that Yujiro is stronger than any army on Earth. Were you surprised to find that out?
Well, no, I mean, that's the whole premise of this thing, right? Like
Yeah.
he's the strongest man in the history of the world of all time. So absolutely anything you throw out there as an alternative it would beat everybody else, but not Yushiro.
Mm-hmm.
I can never pronounce his name. Yeah. So no, that wasn't a surprise.
Yeah. And then, secondly, we see that Tokugawa has been tasked with keeping people safe. Because, in this scene, Yujiro is referred to more as a force of nature, like an earthquake or a hurricane. It truly is building up something that would be one of at least the top 5 greatest father-son fights of all time, I would say.
Truthfully, a fight between you and your father would be earth-shaking. It would be the most important event to have happened in this world in years.
Well, they sort of suggest it's the greatest fight of all time. So then that ought to be also the greatest father-son fight of all time. But then isn't there a little miscommunication at the end where Baki asks him, I want you to keep everybody safe. And his response is, sure, I'll make sure the fight happens. And he's like, no, that's not what I asked.
Yep. Tokugawa is like a fan of the show. He just wants people to fight each other. I think the safety thing is just to make people complain less. Up next, we get another fun little scene. Yujiro talking to Doppo Orochi in a bar. And this one was, I think the most fun of the 4 quick conversations, where Doppo is confused that Yujiro, it's like, oh, I think I love someone. What? Who's that? My son. What?
That was really odd. It's like, I think I'm in love with my son. Ooh, that's creepy. No, he's grown up to be such a great man. Oh, that's what you mean. Why would this guy go there first?
But also it's like, oh, you love your son? Oh no, you love beating up your son. Okay, all right. That was weird for a second there.
Now I get it.
You're in love, Yujiro? Wait a minute. With who?
My son, if you can imagine.
Wait, are you serious?
I've waited for this. The seed that I painstakingly nurtured has finally grown, and at long last is baring its fangs at me.
Oh, right, I get it. That's what you mean.
And he ends it with like, I'm a bit jealous of my... Like, Like, I wish I could go beat up my son. It's I enjoyed that scene because, to be honest, like,
The
I,
bar is eau de vie, right? Eau de vie, water of life, I think.
yeah, that makes sense. They love if anything's fancy in this show, it's usually French. Uh, they also go to a lot of fancy places for no reason. I was just thinking later in this episode when they go to the restaurant and like the maitre d walks out in a tuxedo, that I've seen like 18 different characters like this whose job was to come out in a tuxedo and explain that they're in a fancy place. And it's like, it's not something you
In
associate.
Baki.
Yeah, because they always do this. They always go to fancy places and have fancy food and drink, and like you don't notice it until you think back, and you're like, oh my god, they just keep doing this. Meanwhile, Baki lives in like a hut. But anyway, we had one more conversation with Goki Shibukawa, who gives the great advice of don't fight your dad, but Baki can't take that.
I'm impressed. Really, you've mastered some very stunning skill sets. Even so, you should give up on this father-son fight.
Hey, editor Steve here. So I was just getting a clip for this scene that you just heard, and I just realized that we didn't mention that like Goki like almost stabs Baki in the face just as like a reflex test, and like I can't tell you how much that didn't even register with me. It's amazing how desensitizing this show is. The two people were just talking and a guy almost got stabbed through the eye. But yeah, anyway. Do you agree with Baki that this is not something that you can walk away from? That at some point you must fight your dad?
I totally agree, and we both know this day is coming. There's no sense fighting.
I see. This is why you didn't want
We
Lindsay
have
to
our
come to
dinner
parties.
No, I mean, actually, to be kind of silly here, if you're going to take this as serious literature, it is the sort of episode that cannot be avoided and simply must be dealt with. Yes, so it's really, if you're at the stage where you're either going to have an epic battle to the death with your father or not, there is no choice. You must have it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And to be clear to you and listeners, I am going to be taking this season as a serious literature. I think that this fight in its many parts is probably the closest thing to like a fight that has real like meaning behind all of the choices in it. Even this preamble, like we learn about Baki and his dad in a way that, like, you know, it's not going to win an Emmy or anything, but we do get some analysis of their characters, and that plays into the fight in the way that a good fight should. But let's get
There's
into
a lot of exposition.
Yes,
There's a lot of exposition in this episode.
Well, yes, it is Baki, of course. Baki's 50% exposition and 50% fist.
Okay.
But yeah, let's get into the fun part of the episode. So Baki wants to have his dad over for dinner. You know, why? It's up to interpretation. I think that, and I'm going to save my thoughts on that, actually, for later in the season. But why do you think he wanted to have dinner with his dad?
They don't really state this, but because they both serve each other dinner, I have a sense that that was sort of agreed, and there was an unspoken understanding that after that they would deal with the serious business. They never tell me any of that, but that's the sense that I have.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a father-son conflict. There's not going to be a lot of communication. Yeah. So eventually, Baki makes a pretty nice dinner. He fries up some fish, makes some steak, got some rice going, and his father shows up to his house. I think this is the first time he showed up since he broke into their house when he was sleeping with Kozue. But that was that was definitely different circumstances. This. Editor Steve, like, obviously I'm wrong here. This one with my dad was recorded as one of the early ones, so I got the timing a bit off on a few things. This time it's a lot friendlier, and Yujiro does something we've never seen him do in the show before. He bows to Baki, sort of in respect for the meal.
Thank you for coming, Dad. What? Did he just bow? I mean, he must be saying thank you for the food. I guess I didn't know he could be this proper.
Like,
Well, Baki thinks that he bows to Baki, but he's bowing to the food, right?
yeah, it's interesting. It does seem like it's to the food because he does have a lot of opinions on food. I also love the shots of Baki thinking of all of the farmers and all the process that it took to get their food ready. But
Well, that's Yushiro points that out. He's bowing out of respect for the life. If you're going to eat the life, you have to bow out of respect for it. And I also like he dismisses the artificial flavoring and the preservatives in the store-bought food that Baki serves, and he goes off on a I don't eat wheat, I lean keto and paleo rant that some fathers can go into from time to time, saying I like to eat both food they say is nutritious and food that is poisonous for the body, and that's also kind of interesting because it's sort of anti-fragile, which is a little bit of stress in the body is good in the long term for it. So he has well developed philosophical thoughts with respect to how one should eat for such a savage as I had thought Yushiro was, but as late we soon see he's not really this savage guy. But I haven't watched that many episodes.
Oh yeah, no, he's got multiple sides to him. What I enjoyed about that scene was maybe my favorite line of the episode, where Baki says something along the lines of, "Wow, how lucky am I to have my dad talk to me about nutrition."
Holy crap. My dad's taking the time to educate me about nutrition?
And I was like, wow, I can I can really relate with this Baki guy.
A universal father-son experience, yes.
Yeah, but you know what? That's what's really pulls the curtain back here, because we always refer to Baki as he's Yujiro's son and all that, but their relationship throughout the entire show has been basically non-existent. Like Baki was technically raised by his mom, who basically just paid to have him fight people all day. And he's probably only interacted with Yujiro a handful of times. So, like, these type of interactions are so new and fresh to Baki. He's, like, never had a parental figure even, like, talk to him, basically, about anything like this.
Well, although the relationship is clearly, I don't know if strained is the right word, but they do look like father and son who understand there is the familial bond during this meal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would look at it, and if it's episode one, you'd still think, yeah, well, this is father son. There's something going on in that relationship, but this is father son. So I definitely see that.
Yeah, and then so after their dinner, I think my favorite part of the episode, Baki wants to ask his dad to do the dishes. And I think that the reason behind this is it's more of this, like, Baki wants this normal parent-child relation, like he wants to have these real moments where his dad's going to do the dishes after he made dinner, because that's only fair. And his dad, I think, Yujiro, I think he was also honestly on the same page, that he was looking for this type of moment, but at the same time probably didn't want to do the dishes or didn't want to look weak. So he says, let's do Rochambeau for it. So I enjoyed that moment just from a character perspective, but how it played out, I just enjoyed because it's hilarious. Can you describe who won that round, Dad?
Well, yes, I will. I'll give you one quick thing. There's a lot going through Baki's mind, a lot of neurotic thoughts that we're privy to as the audience. And may he rest in peace. It just reminded me so much of Chandler Bing, Matthew Perry on Friends. All these thoughts. Oh, what about this? What about that?
It was horrible. He called me young lady.
Ooh, I hate when my father calls me that.
And so we hear them all, and then they do rock, paper, scissors, and of course, Baki wins with rock over scissors, but then uh, Yushiro just takes his fingers in the scissor position and puts them over the rock and proceeds to crush Baki's hand so much that he gives in. He doesn't have to do the dishes. And that seemed very fatherly to me, too. It reminded me of some families will often take votes on what they're going to do and whether there should be ice cream for dessert or whatever. And sometimes everybody at the table gets a vote, but the chairman of the board gets, say, 5 votes. And a lot of votes end up going 5-4 with the children all on the wrong side of that vote. So that reminded me very much of how Yushiro dealt with losing in rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, yeah. Your chairman of the board routine is very similar. It's the verbal equivalent of crushing our rock, of having the most votes with one very strong pair of scissors. Yeah, no, it was good. It almost feels like something that could happen if I could imagine somebody had fingers that strong. But it was a good little scene. And eventually Yujiro just leaves. He teleports for some reason over to the guards that are standing around.
He leaves Baki doing the dishes.
Yes, which is great. But he leaves. There were riot police all around, making sure nobody came to the house, and for some reason that made him mad. But in general, we're just setting up the next scene, which is that this time Yujiro is going to take Baki out to dinner. Now this part I also enjoyed, as we go from the crappy little shed with graffiti on it that Baki lives to a world-class 5-star hotel. Probably the restaurant's probably 30 stories high.
Okay, do you know what restaurant popped into my mind for this entire scene?
Are you thinking of Canoe?
Le Cigar Volant. Now,
Right.
do you know Le Cigar Volant?
No.
That is where Niles and Fraser Crane go to. It's the go-to place, Le Cigar Volant, and this is such, to me, such a non-Baki little vignette. It might as well be Niles and Fraser Crane. I mean, they drink sherry. Sherry Niles, yes, please. Yujiro drinks sherry. He's wearing a tuxedo. He's talking about all the finer points of life. It seemed more like a Frasier episode than a Baki episode.
Yeah. You don't think you're gonna learn like which utensils to eat from first, or how to enjoy the soup.
Exactly.
Oh my god, I have to come up with some sort of edit with the sherry and Frasier.
Sherry? I couldn't possibly, Niles. I'm too upset.
A dry sherry for me, served in a large glass.
It's such a fun juxtaposition, but it's this is what I mean by like paying off like a bit of character growth, because or character details, because Baki has always been shown as this like one step above a street rat, honestly. But Yujiro is, whenever we cut to him and he's not fighting somebody, he's staying at like the world's swankiest hotel, or he's swimming in a private pool or things like that. And I liked how they sort of dove into like the idea that Baki isn't like Yujiro, and it's because he's never been exposed to him in any way, really. Like there's been no chance for this type of knowledge to rub off on him. And maybe if he did, Baki wouldn't be such a meathead.
It reminded me of when we went to Keen's in New York, and the second oldest steakhouse, and everyone's nicely dressed, and I didn't think to have you dress up, and you were fairly underdressed at that time, so you were a little bit like Baki walking into this place when we walked into Keen's, although we had a great time.
The highest compliment you can say. I was a little bit like Baki at that time. That was such a great steakhouse. I bet Baki could have finished that porterhouse steak we got. This is me eating that ginormous steak.
Sorry to keep you waiting, sir.
He's not going to eat a whole roast pig himself, is he? He's huge. Gotta be 6'5".
They end up eating. Oh, I forgot. There was one line that I just found ridiculous. Baki comes in, talks to some maitre d', and he's just like, "So, what does my dad eat?" And the guy goes, "Well, your dad eats everything, although he doesn't eat beef, chicken, or pork." So I was like, it doesn't sound like he eats everything on the menu. Like, it sounds like there's a pretty big blind spot there.
I see. And what kind of food does he eat?
He eats a large amount of everything. But instead of domestic animals, such as beef and chicken, he prefers game meat, like venison, wild duck, boar, and... Ah! Mr. Hanma!
He eats wild boar, and duck, and I forget something else, but all venison. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which, it's funny because we just came off the caveman arc, and his whole thing was he'd only eat things that he killed personally, so it's sort of a similar philosophy. But this leads in, eventually they have this amazing 7-course meal. They have espresso to end it off. We find out espresso is quite bitter. And Baki decides it's this moment on his second dinner date to say, so why'd you kill my mom? Were you surprised to find out that Yujiro had murdered Baki's mom?
Yes, I was. I was ignorant of that fact up until this time, and it certainly gave me a deeper understanding of why Baki might have had some mild and lingering resentment towards his father. And his father did not like being asked the question.
No.
He thought that, there's a line you do not cross, and with father-son questions, and demanding an explanation for the murder of the mother apparently is one step beyond that line.
Yeah. He got, I think the term is big mad about that. Like, he broke the table. I think we saw dust falling down on the floors beneath them. And by the way, just to paint the scene for you, because it's this part of the backstory makes it so absurd that they're trying to have this relationship. But, like, it's not just that Yujiro murdered his mother. Like, in front of Baki, after punching Baki to the floor, he picked up his mom and bear hugged her to death. Like, all of this happened in front of Baki's eyes.
And we saw this. If you had watched every episode, you would have seen this.
Yeah. To be fair, you'd have to watch the original Baki from like 20 years ago, but yes, it was covered back then.
So it's accepted fact. People should know this by now.
Yeah. We also there's a refresher episode at the start of this season that covered it.
Right. Okay. So you'd think it would be tough to move on from that if you were Baki. I don't think I'd be making my dad dinner and asking him to do the dishes if I watched him crush my mom to death.
How else will he pay for it?
Already...
though? That's his penance is doing the dishes. Anyway.
Yeah. No, that's a pretty hard fact, harsh fact, and a difficult one to forgive, I think.
Yeah. But Baki's able to, get Yujiro riled up. And then he actually sort of keeps on the offensive, pushes Yujiro up to the glass. And remember, they're like 30 stories up. And it looks like we might be at the precipice of the greatest father-son fight in history. And then the episode ends.
Fortunately, yeah, exactly. Just when I thought the episode might get somewhat interesting, that's the end of the episode. But it looks, to me, it's meant to look like Baki has the upper hand. Perhaps this question is the Achilles heel of Yushiro, and maybe it's going to give Baki a chance at taking down the old man, who I now can no longer root for in any capacity. So even though I should be on Team Father, but I just
even though you've decided he is keto and paleo.
He crossed the line by killing mom.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Who do you think's gonna win? Who do you think's gonna win in the end?
It's got to be Baki, right? With that last minute fact about how evil Yushiro is. It has to be Baki. My money is on Baki, and he's probably plus might be plus 185, I think, books, but I'm gonna put my money on Baki.
All right. Well, I can't bet, unfortunately, but we'll see. We'll see who wins. We'll
Yes,
see
we will.
we'll see very soon. I'm actually going to record that episode in like 5 hours. But yeah, got to get everything done before December. Anywho, all right. Well, now that we've talked about the episode, you've watched 2 episodes of Baki. Do you think that it's getting better or worse, or staying the same?
Well, I would say better because my memory of the first one was that it was horrible. But this one was it, it's funny because you said you really liked it. Maybe because it's so different, I think, than so many. To me, it was kind of like a soap opera, and it was. It was kind of a combination of a soap opera and a Frasier episode, which so I kind of enjoyed it, but it was it didn't seem like a Baki episode to me. That at least I'm not like the fellow who every time you have him on, it's all about urination.
Yeah,
But
that would have
it's
felt out of
improving
place
just
in
based.
this episode.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd say it's getting better.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that this episode is special because it sort of does something that's not typically done. If every episode was like this, it wouldn't be as I wouldn't enjoy it as much. But I like the I like the sort of build up that we have to this fight. Cool. All right. Well, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, we are having dinner on Monday, or I shouldn't get too precise, but in 2 days.
Great save. But at the same time, I'm not editing this because we had dinner like a month ago.
So don't dress like Baki. And remember, we go outside in for the utensils.
Yep.
And certain foods are best eaten with a spoon.
Okay, that's good to know. And you're gonna do the dishes, right?
Well, we'll put that to a vote of the with the chairman of the board present.
I see. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on both times. And that's all the Baki we've got to talkie. And I'll see you all next week. And then you say bye.
Goodbye.
I always wanted my own brother, and then he showed up at our door. I didn't question where he came from. I wasn't lonely anymore. Soon we did everything together. He taught me how to fly a kite. I watched him grow into a stallion. I watched him sleep in bed at night. It's not creepy.
All right, recommendation time. Although this week it's a little bit different. I don't even know if this is truly a recommendation, but more of a recognition. This whole season has been an attempt for me to sort of thank guests who have been on so many times, and that's why I keep bringing back these fan favorites is what I call them. But they're really, I don't want to say my favorites. Everybody's been a great help, but these are people who came on multiple times, and I really appreciate it. And so I thought it'd be fun to give a recommendation where it's more me acknowledging, an influence that I always found, to be a creative influence on me as a content creator. Ugh, sounds weird to call myself that. But I just want to give a shout out to sort of a dying art form, but it was something that I always found hilarious as a kid, is the idea of an abridged series, which, as I've thought about it, is sort of the inverse of a podcast, especially my podcast. Because at its core, an abridged series and a podcast are both taking a source material and using that to create a show. Like I am taking the audio from Baki and using that to create this format that I've done. And how an abridged series work is they do it the exact opposite way. They take the visuals and they do their own voices. An abridged series is way more work, and you actually need to be good at voice acting. Well... if you listen to any of them, being good at voice acting is, I guess, very objective. But when I was younger, I loved Yu-Gi-Oh! The abridged series, and Friendship is Witchcraft, two incredible series. I played some music from Friendship is Witchcraft. That was sort of the, I think, better one. It had very high production value. It had custom songs, custom animations. Like, they were just pumping out high quality stuff the whole time, and super funny. And I don't know how popular that show was, but one of the two creative halves of it, Jenny Nicholson, has gone on to make just incredible videos that get millions of hits. Her BronyCon documentary, her Ever Free Park documentary, the Vampire Diaries video, that's a recommendation. Watch that. It's like 3 hours and it's great. But before she did that, she was doing all the voices and part of the writing for an abridged series for My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, that I found hilarious back then. And I assume I still would now. I'm not going to rewatch all of it for this recommendation. And that's why I'm making it a recognition, because these things can have a bit of rose-tinted glasses. But on the flip side of that, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series did not have the same presentation stuff. What they did have is a ridiculous show that they were able to just make fun of and just have so many quotes that still are in my head today.
My voice gives me super strength.
Yes, but my hair gives me the power to defy gravity.
They were early examples that just like a very small team with just their basis of just a show that exists can create something funny to watch that can last almost as long as the show itself. And I think this podcast is sort of a mirrored reflection of that idea. Anyway, not everything's that deep. I just liked these videos as a kid, and I just wanted to give them a shout out. See y'all next week.
Squish and squash and making tacky jelly. Put it on your head, we're gonna win the race. Because I am a good eraser, I am running oh so fast. Fun levels are to the max. Applejack flies through the air, apples fall without a care. Apples are not meant to fly, no apples get